In the year 1936, in the city of Aomori, Japan, there was a prisoner named Yoshi Shiratori. He was unjustly imprisoned. They forced him to confess to a crime he did not commit, and the public prosecution worked to impose the death penalty on him. On top of that, he was constantly tortured by the guards. One day, Shiratori decided to escape from prison. At 6 in the morning, he started moving. He knew that there would be 15 minutes between patrols to change guards because he had been monitoring their movements for 3 months. When the right moment came, he took out an iron wire. He had gotten it from the bucket of water in the toilet, and he began to undo the lock. His hands were frozen from the severity of the cold, but after a few minutes of trying, he was able to open the cell door. The problem was that he still had several doors to go through before the guards returned. He did not waste time. Door after door, he opened them all and left. But this was half the way to freedom, because he was still within the search zone. At any moment, the alarm would go off, and they could catch him. After 15 minutes, the guards returned and inspected the cell, and thought that Shiratori was dead. He was still sleeping. They did not know that what was under the cover was a piece of wood that Shiratori had removed from under his bed and placed in his place. In fact, he was able to deceive them. If you come here with me to watch the story, drink a cup of coffee so that you can enjoy more, because what is coming is greater. Shiratori, 3 days after his escape, was caught trying to steal equipment from a hospital, and they took him back to his cell. Because he tried to escape this time, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. He could no longer see his family again, and all the months he plans to escape and lost only 3 days of freedom. However, Shiratori is known as the prison escape magician, and the issue is much bigger than you can imagine. After 6 years, specifically in 1942, during World War II, Shiratori was transferred to a prison, Akita, in the city of Akita. There, the guards treated him worse than the Aomori prison guards because they heard about his attempts to escape from Aomori to set an example. In addition to beatings, they forced him to work hard and left him to sleep on the floor without a mattress, which was severe. It was cold, and they left him in solitary confinement for a very long time. The problem was that the solitary confinement prison was designed in a special way, very small in terms of area. The ceiling was very high, and its walls were covered with very smooth copper sheets so that no one could climb. This cell was designed specifically for people skilled at escaping, and although this cell was sufficient, the guards would leave Shiratori's hands tied all the time, regardless of the harm that Shiratori experienced. One of the guards, named Shiratori Kobayashi, who was the head of the guards, had pity on him and did not torture him like the other guards. He would check on him from time to time and check on him. Could this be the thing that made Shiratori endure all this injustice until the 15th of June? It was a stormy night, and Shiratori was at that time. He was in solitary confinement as usual. When it was midnight, one of the guards looked at him, but he was shocked. Shiratori evaporated. He wasn't in the cell. There were only the handcuffs. How the guards did it. They were literally shocked. How could he break the handcuffs? The thing he didn't know. The guards said that the shackles were like a game to Shiratori. He could open them in one moment and in all ways. But the guards said that he was able to open them with a wire, as he did in Aomori prison. And as for the walls, he was able to climb them in seconds, as if he were a lizard. He was able to reach the hole on him and opened it as well. Shiratori had been able to escape months before and had prepared a plan, but he decided to wait until a strong storm occurred so that the guards would not be able to hear his steps. Shiratori was able to escape for the second time. 3 months after Shiratori's escape, on September 18th, the head guard Kobayashi was in his house. He knocked on the door, and when he opened it, he was surprised to find that the person in front of him, Shiratori, was in a shameful situation and in need of help. So Kobayashi took him into the house and gave him food. They sat together, and Shiratori began telling his story to Kobayashi, and he also told him that he had no problem entering prison. But the thing that made me escape twice was torture, and the guards did not spare me. I am an innocent and oppressed man, and your kind treatment of me encouraged me. To tell you what I will do, I will go to justice and surrender myself. But at the same time, I will file a lawsuit against the guards, expose the corruption in Japanese prisons, and I will launch a major campaign so that we can change the situation and let people know that I am a person. I'm oppressed, and I can gain my freedom, and I can return to my wife and daughter. I cannot live my whole life on the run. Moments later, Shiratori went to the bathroom, and Kobayashi called the police. His trust in him was misplaced. He was returned to prison. Shiratori then decided that he would not trust anyone anymore, and because he tried to escape for the second time, the court sentenced him to an additional 3 years. During the trial, Shiratori asked the court to transfer him to a prison in Tokyo because the weather there was warm and he had not returned. He endured the cold, but the court refused to do so, and the judge was also against it, and he was transferred to Abashiri Prison in Hokkaido. This prison is located in the far north of Japan, and no one has ever been able to escape from this prison because whoever thinks of escaping finds himself lost in a deadly winter hell. The year was 1943, and the cold was unbearable in Abashiri Prison. The temperature in the cell was below freezing. When it was time to eat, you would find him frozen from the extreme cold. Despite all this, they put Shiratori in his cell, in his summer clothes, and because of the extreme cold, he was sitting like a paralyzed person. In a moment of despair, he stood up to them, but they beat him and threw him to the ground. Out of extreme despair, he stood up and challenged them and said to them in a loud voice, "I promise you that I will run away again. And believe me, you won't be able to stop me." He told them that the handcuffs you are putting on my hands will not prevent me from escaping. These handcuffs do not work on me, and I know a million ways to free myself from them. If I cannot open them, I will break them. And he actually broke them in front of them. The guards were frightened and turned back. It was clear that he had other skills, but he did wrong because he revealed papers to the guards who had prepared for him a special cell made of steel, and all the openings in it were very small, and on top of that, they put handcuffs on him. His hands are behind his back, and his feet are tied as well. The problem is that the handcuffs they put on him were of a different type. They did not have a key that opened them, and they weighed 20 kilograms. The way they were able to open them was that every week, 2 specialists came to unlock them, and the process took them 2 hours. They opened it every time it was time for the bathroom, and the guards only allowed him to do so every week. And even though the weather was very cold, the real winter had not yet arrived. How much will Shiratori endure with the cold that will come and the conditions that he is enduring? His portion of food was also reduced, so any energy would remain with him until he could escape. Indeed, Shiratori could no longer stand on his feet, and whenever they put food for him, he crawled like a lizard. The shackles that were placed on his hands and feet made his movement difficult, and he could no longer move. Able to move well, even sleeping was painful for him. His life in Abashiri Prison was literally torture. Winter ended and spring came. Here he began to regain his energy. Once for several months, nothing changed. Until one night, one of the guards heard a voice. He began inspecting the prisoners, and when he arrived at Shiratori's cell, he was astonished by the tidy bed and the handcuffs he needed. It was sent to experts to open it and place it in front of the bed, but Shiratori was not there. The alarm was activated, despite search efforts. Shiratori disappeared. The question is how he was able to escape, despite the suffering he was experiencing. Preparations for this escape began 6 months ago, at a time when he was exhausted and had no energy. When they brought him food, he would leave a little of it. And every night he jumps and pretends he is watching from the window, but in reality he was sprinkling the soup on the window and putting it on the handcuffs. His plan is that the salt in the soup will lead to the oxidation of the window Indeed, after a month, what was unthinkable happened, and by the end of spring, he was able to open the handcuffs and windows. Although the guards were careful and made all the openings small, they were not aware that Shiratori was a highly flexible person. The only thing Shiratori needed to do was remove his head, but the rest was very easy, and he became the first person to escape from a prison. Abashiri, a great effort and a successful plan, but do not forget that this prison is located in the far north. The guards were laughing at him and saying that he was a crazy person who would definitely die from the cold or be eaten by animals. After the news of his escape spread, the only person who had hope was him, his wife, who hoped that Japan would lose in World War II so that the prison system would be changed. After a year, her wish came true, and Japan lost the war against America in 1945. The prison system was changed, and some charges were overlooked, and searching for Shiratori was no longer important. But the question is, where is he, and is he still alive? The answer is yes, but in complete isolation. This time he was the one who locked himself inside an abandoned mine in a mountain in Hokkaido. As for food, he hunted wild rabbits and picked fruits from the trees on the mountain. He stayed there for a while, but then curiosity killed him, and he decided to go to a small town and saw that everything had changed. The streets are all written in English, and all the signs symbolizing war have disappeared. The strangest thing is that the girls of Japan are condemning the American soldiers. He was not aware of what was happening, so he found a newspaper thrown on the ground and read it, and learned about the 2 bombs that fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He learned that Japan had surrendered a year ago. It was a surprise to him, and he immediately decided to say goodbye to wildlife and head from the north of Abashiri to the south, and he kept walking for 50 days. Until he reached a city called Sabaru. He was hungry and started looking for anything to eat until he found mora. He made a tomato and went in to eat it. It was the biggest mistake. The farm owner saw him and attacked him. Shiratori took out a knife and stabbed the farmer and killed him. It did not take long for Shiratori to be caught, and from the first moment they knew that he was the magician of escaping from prison. Shiratori tried to convince them that he was defending himself, but the Sapporo court sentenced him to death. In 1947, he was transferred to Sapporo prison to await his execution date. In order not to escape this time, he was placed under 24-hour surveillance with 6 armed guards on duty. Only by monitoring Shiratori, the cell was so challenging that it was impossible to escape. Everything in the cell was 10 times stronger than Abashiri prison, to the point that the guards did not pay attention to him and did not put handcuffs on him. Shiratori is now old, and his execution date is approaching. Everyone could see the despair on his face. He was looking up all the time and looking for an escape plan. The guards were confident that this was impossible, but as a precaution, they were checking on Shiratori every night. His execution date was getting closer and closer, and he was sleeping all the time. He even began to not respond to the guards when they ordered him, until one day the guards became fed up with him because he did not listen to their orders, and they decided to torture him. And here was the surprise. Shiratori was not there. The guards were shocked. This was impossible. Since the day they put him in the cell, Shiratori had been... He looked up and made them think that he wanted to escape from the ceiling, but the guards knew that it was impossible and neglected the floor, and this was the easiest escape for him. All he did was remove the wood on the floor, which was a simple matter for Shiratori. He used an eating plate to dig. The subject took more than a month with him, and the guards were not going to complain in this way, and because the hole was under his bed, and he was accustomed to them, that he did not listen to their orders. Whenever they checked the cell, they found him sleeping. But what was actually in his place was the wood of the floor. Now he escaped from prison 4 times, and the cycle of catching him while escaping became ridiculous. In the year 1948, Shiratori became tired. He was more than 40 years old, and escaping had become a youth game. One day he was in the Kotoni neighborhood in Sapporo, sitting on a chair to relax. A policeman came and sat in front of him and lit a cigarette. The policeman did not know who Shiratori was, and Shiratori knew that if the policeman recognized him, what the end would be like, so he decided to talk to him normally, without drawing attention. Suddenly, the policeman made an unexpected move. It made Shiratori break down crying. The policeman took out a pack of cigarettes and offered Shiratori to smoke. At that time, a pack of cigarettes was a luxury in Japan at that time. When someone offers you a cigarette, it is a strange thing. How about being a policeman? He spent half his life being tortured by the police, and it also made him remember the chief guard, Kobayashi, and how he betrayed him while he was at his house, and how this policeman treated him with respect and kindness without knowing that he had escaped from prison. While he was smoking, he couldn't help himself. He told the policeman his full name, Yoshi Shiratori, and told him that he had escaped from Sapporo prison last year, and that he had escaped from prison 4 times. It was a feeling of complete relief that evaporated. Yes, he was arrested, but this time was different. He surrendered himself willingly, and according to the law, the Japanese was going through a period of change, and the senior authority at Subaru sympathized with him, and his statements were considered. The farmer's death was in self-defense, and they took into account that all his attempts to escape from prison did not harm anyone, and that he was only escaping the torture of the guards, and yet he did not take revenge on them. In the end, the Supreme Court overturned the death sentence, sentenced him to 20 years in prison, and agreed to transfer him to a warm prison in Tokyo. For the first time, the guards treated him well. It was a strange feeling, even though they were careful that he would try to escape. But he stopped. He couldn't have just escaped from the guards' treatment. This time he accepted the punishment and remained in prison without problems. After 14 years in 1961, he was released for good behavior. He decided to return to Amory and met his daughter after a long time, the only remaining member of his family. Because he made great escapes, he became a very famous person, like heroes. This is our story today, and if you like it, do not hesitate to like, subscribe to the channel, and evaluate the story.